I came across a wonderful story this week. It's from a guy called Gerald. Not a particularly inspiring name, it has to be said, but his story, for me at least, I found very inspiring. So this is a true story from a man named Gerald from Bournemouth. And this has come from his memoirs, which was shared by his son during a service at Portsmouth Cathedral last year. So some of this has been shared before. But Gerald Solomon had been a young curate, which if you don't know what that is, it's like a trainee vicar or an NQT is kind of the best parallel. But as a young curate, Gerald felt called to sign up to be an army chaplain in 1942. He found it, as he put it, quite a culture shock to, in a month, move from being the curate of Broadstone to being the padre of a gunner regiment. They sailed later that year, and his ship, though damaged from torpedoes, reached port in North Africa just before Christmas. He found himself in Tunis, which is the capital of Tunisia, holding a strange yet moving service, a Christmas service, in a brickwork factory. But after Christmas, there was fighting, a baptism of fire, as he said, and where he was constantly with the wounded and burying the dead, burying them where they fell and making careful map references of their graves. Services were arranged on an ad hoc basis, and sometimes Gerald found it too dangerous, and as he wrote, it was simply a matter of going round the chaps and having a few words with as many as possible. He said, service rather than services was so often the keynote. Some of the most moving experiences of my whole ministry have consisted in taking short service or even saying a few words to some little group under a tree or in a barn when they were lonely and old and bored or frightened, as at times we all were. Then after the fall of Tunis, Gerald's division was posted to Sicily, another success, but at a very high cost. Gerald mentioned being introduced by the major to a new young captain who had just arrived in his post. But within 24 hours, he found himself burying both the major and the new captain. And his comment was, "What a brutal thing is war." After Sicily, he was posted up the Adriatic coast and onto Monte Cassino, where Gerald was chaplain for a forward surgical team located as near the battle line as possible to save lives at speed rather than risking moving the injured to hospitals. After a break for his division that summer and a reef in Egypt, he had another costly, beastly winter, as he called it, in northern Italy, where he remained until the end of the war. Then, after the war, he was sent to Austria to fill a peacekeeping role and support the poor and deprived population. People, as he noted, had only recently been enemies. After the war, Gerald stayed on as a chaplain with the army until eventually retiring in 1963. I found this a particularly striking story. I'm sure this is only the very broad, very brief story of his life rather than the specifics, but we often hear stories from war heroes or people scarred by war, maybe horror stories, I don't know. But this is unique for me in my post, my position here, to think what my life might have looked like had I been born 80 years prior. You know, I could have easily ended up doing the things that he was doing rather than standing at the front here in 2025. Gerald had this amazing life, no doubt, seeing some horrible things. And the culmination of his service in the military during the war was the fact that he then served in Austria, serving the people who should be enemies, the people he was probably taught and instructed should be hated and got rid of at all costs. Yet these are the people he finds himself serving at the end of his time there. Gerald's story teaches us a lot as a Christian. Even if you don't have any faith, there's a lot we can learn from him too. We've got the really good news at the moment that a few people from Anna would like to be baptised. Woohoo! And one thing that was really nice is, as I was doing this, one of the things that I came across was that every Christian at baptism is called to be a soldier and a servant of Jesus Christ. I know it's a bit of a sweeping statement, but it's really interesting this in relation to Gerald and his life. The soldiering bit is about playing our part in battle with evil in the world in its many forms. You know, being honest, most of us aren't going to end up in conflict the way that Gerald was. Most of us won't end up in the front line of a war. But we do, but our life as Christians will take us into engagement with evils of greed or violence, envy, injustice, exploitation, to name a few. But there is also the sense of service, and this is what I really liked about Gerald's story. Gerald found himself ministering to the wounded, offering prayer, healing, burying the dead with as much dignity as possible. He didn't hold programs. He didn't put together carol concerts, I don't imagine. He didn't do Halloween hot dog stands. And I'm not critiquing any of those things, by the way, because the hot dog stand was really good. But he did find himself in that striking sentence offering service rather than services. Being there for people, helping as best he could, no doubt being harrowed by what he'd seen himself. To the extent that he was rebuilding, as I said, the people who'd been his enemies. We are called to practice what we preach, be abounding in love to people we agree with and disagree with. We are called to love our enemies. Gerald lived in a time occupied by war, and so his choices and the circumstance and service were a result of that. And so I wonder how that might translate into our existence 80-odd years later. You know, our circumstance is not a global war. Mine is standing up the front of a little community hall in Drayton rather than standing on a battleship. If you are a Christian, you are enlisted into the army. Only this army serves the Prince of Peace. Quite a contradiction in some ways, but a brilliant one. Regardless of your age, background, race, or anything, we each have a part to play in God's kingdom, in God's army. You are needed. You are needed to be a soldier and to serve. To be on the side of life and not death. To be on the side of peace. As Christian faith gets ever rarer in our country and things seem ever more doom and gloom, as I know we've talked about a lot, every action counts. Every conscript is needed and important. And as horrible as that word may be for us, as detached even as that word may be for us, we all do have our part to play as part of God's army. In the fight for light over darkness, truth over falsehood, life over death, as we serve God by fighting and serving those around us. And as Dave said, we have those brilliant words from John chapter 15. There is no greater, this is in the context of Jesus and his final instructions to his disciples, where he says, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Jesus showed the ultimate love by going one step further, though. Paul says later on that Jesus laid down his life. He died for his enemies as well as his friends. Paul says that we were once enemies of God. We were once enemies of Jesus as we turned our back on the things that he stood for, of the things that he taught us. And yet he still chooses to die under the curse of God, as we talked about in Robbie and Anne's home group last week. By dying on a cross, it was the most humiliating, the most undignified way he could. And he didn't do that for his friends, or he didn't do that just for his friends. He did that for the people that opposed him too. The people that would cast lots for his clothes, the people that swore at him, the people who whipped, beat and bruised him too. And so as we come to communion, it's a wonderful reminder of us, of Jesus' broken body, as we share in broken bread. And it's a reminder of his shed blood as we share in drinking grape juice together. Whatever your faith may or may not look like, whether you're excited to be baptized or just here because you got dragged here, God died for you. Jesus died for you because he loves you. It was an act, a completely unselfish act of love for you. And so as we share this, it's a reminder of Jesus' broken body and broken blood. So let's share in that.